Welcome to our podcast On the Ground Up, where we interview startup founders exploring their journeys, their successes, challenges, and lessons learned. We hope you'll be inspired in discovering what it takes to build a thriving startup. I'm your host, Jake Aaron Villarreal, and here with us today we have Heather Udo, founder and CEO of Shoppable. Heather, welcome to the show.
Hey, Jake. Thank you so much for having me.
Great. So a little bit about Heather. She's a visionary entrepreneur, leader in e-commerce and media industry with over 15 years of experience in creating and scaling innovative digital solutions. She leads Shoppable, a technology company that enables media companies, brands, and retailers to bring the checkout experience to anywhere a consumer discovers or engages with their products. Before we dive in here, Heather, where are you joining us from today?
New York.
Great. And are you originally from there?
No, I grew up in Wisconsin and came to New York by way of San Francisco and London.
Oh, wow. Multicultural, distributed. Well, we'll talk about Shoppable and get into your story here. Prior to that, you did have a successful exit at a startup that experienced most employees and founders probably would love to have. What were a few lessons you learned from that experience and from your previous CEO as a leader?
Oh my gosh. There's so many lessons when you can, as a future entrepreneur, I suppose, go through it with someone else first. And I would say one of the biggest things that I learned is essentially that if you have the right people if you have the right people at your company, then it doesn't matter what problems and challenges come your way, which is entrepreneurs, or business leaders, we all know the problems are coming. They just vary. Right. But one of the things that I learned is it doesn't matter what those problems are, so long as you have the right people. And I'll tell you one quick story if I can. We had a lead generation business. And anyway, we had a lot of, we were selling leads. And we had come back on a Monday from a long weekend or something to a massive mountain of fraud. All this fraud that had been sent through our systems. And, of course, everything's all automated. So this is not at my current company, this is the last one. We had intentionally sent a bunch of fraudulent leads to our clients at the time. And, I think the company, I don't know if we had maybe 6 people at the time. It was really, relatively early stage, but we managed to make some good progress. And anyway, when I saw the amount of fraud going through our system, I thought, oh my God, this is the end. like all of our clients are going to hate us. Like, I don't know how, I'm going to have to tell them what happened. And, we're probably going to lose all the business. Anyway, I was just thinking all the worst things. And, our CEO got all of the leaders together, got around the table, and we figured out how we could build a custom solution to solve the problem. And not only that, when we ended up exiting the company later, it became one of the system that we built to solve that fraud problem became one of the major features and selling points for the company later,
Wow.
A few years later.
That's amazing. Yeah, as a leader, you always try and see things for what they are, never as bad as you think and never as good as you think. But that perspective in times like that is very, very helpful, to say the least. That's great. So you learned a little bit about that. Let's talk a little bit about what inspired you or led you to launch what you have today, which is Shoppable. You leave a company, you got acquired, you're in Silicon Valley, you're in a different place today. Walk us through what inspired you, what the problem was that you saw that you felt like you could help solve.
Yeah. So at that point, I had run into a problem over and over again that led me to starting this business. And the problem was that as consumers, and 99% of people have this problem, so I'm sure the listeners have had this happen, but we come across great products on TV and mobile, on digital media sites, and you can't purchase them. And most of the content is not shoppable, and there's a huge disconnect and a lot of friction between discovering a great product and actually being able to purchase it. So I had a particular experience where the aha moment kind of came as an entrepreneur, which I had moved into a one bedroom apartment for the first time after this exit, and had to figure out how to decorate it. So I was jumping from site to site, and I needed to buy a lot of goods in a short period of time. So looking for convenience was really, really important. And the realization was that, obviously the only place that consumers could buy was either in a retail store or an e-commerce site. But most of the products are in front of us all day throughout the day are not shoppable, but that's what we see. That's where the demand becomes created. So anyway, I realized there was a huge disconnect between that discovery process and actually being able to purchase. So what if I partnered with all the major retailers, all the D2C brands, created this universal shopping technology, and then pushed it out through licenses and other means to everywhere else, so that whether you're watching TV, you're on social, you're reading a blog, didn't matter what kind of screen you're interacting with, everything could be shoppable. So that's really how I got started.
God, it sounds daunting. It sounds like something that should have been solved a long time ago. And you've got a solution. It's a technology company, but you aren't an engineer by background. Is that correct?
I am not.
Okay. So here you go. You have an idea. You want to build a solution to solve a problem. It's a technical problem that you can solve with technology. You're in Silicon Valley. You decided to build this company on the East Coast. What led you to the East Coast?
So yeah, so I started it from San Francisco, where I was originally. And in order to first, build the proof of concept of being able to combine multiple retailers into a single database and then into a single retailer, I needed to have some retailer partnerships. So I was calling every retailer I could think of, and it's so hard to obviously get their attention, get them on phone calls. But when I finally did, they'd all say, "Oh, where are you based?" And the second I said San Francisco, and this was a decade ago now, so it's a little different now, but the second I said San Francisco, there was a very clear change in tone on the calls. They're like, "Oh, okay, well, let us know if you ever come to New York, and maybe we'll find a time to meet then." And it was just like, well, what about San Francisco was deterring these people? It was like so funny, but it was so clear. I'm like, they want a company that is like selling to them or partnering with them. They clearly were expecting me to be in New York, and I was losing credibility by not being here. So I flew to New York on, business trip, booked as many of these meetings as I could to get in person. And I realized I'm able to get more done that actually moves the needle and moves the business forward by being based in New York, where all my potential partners and clients are, than like 6 months in San Francisco. So I moved the next month, and I've been here ever since.
That's great. Talk a little bit about the problem it solves. Give us a use case of, say, a brand that you're working with today. And when you went to them, what were they doing, and what are they doing now they're benefiting from your from your product?
Yeah, so there's a lot of different use cases for the technology, but I'll say like one example is Revlon Cosmetics. So they brand that everybody knows, but for them, they have a lot of advertisements, whether it's on social or commercials and everywhere in between. But and I can't speak specific to anyone's data, but for a lot of consumer packaged good companies, without shoppable technology, not only would they have to redirect or send traffic to various retailer experiences, but they don't have the ability to capture the consumer data and understand who's actually purchasing their products. So for the use case for them, or any CPG, they often utilize Shoppable's technology to transform either their ads or their websites into shoppable experiences, where they can embed a checkout directly in that experience. And then on the back end, the orders get fulfilled through Shoppable's retail partners, whether that be Walmart or Best Buy or whoever. But that allows the advertiser or Shoppable's customer the ability to create the shoppable experience without having to hold inventory, without having to become PCI compliant, without having to become merchant of record and pay transaction fees. All of those things go away with partnership with Shoppable.
Wow. Sounds amazing. It sounds almost too good to be true, but it actually is very true. And you are a growing company. You're profitable. You've run a great organization. You went through an accelerator, 500 startups, maybe in the early days. Going through that experience, what were some of the benefits you took out of that before you really went to market to launch and build your company?
Oh, wow. So with 500 startups, I mean, they really, for us, they helped in a lot of ways, because I think what's hard for first time entrepreneurs is it looks a lot easier from the outside, I think, to start a company, and even for executives on founding teams and things like that, it looks a lot easier than it actually is, and there's so many moving pieces, and it can be hard to know what's most important to focus on in what order. And I think they provided a lot of guidance on some of those kind of early things that I didn't really, some things that I didn't even realize I didn't know, because even though I went through it with this other serial entrepreneur at the last company, I was not the founder myself. So there's a lot of stuff that just, was done that wasn't privy to. A lot of things that I had no idea about. So 500 startups really helped a lot with a lot of those things. They have an incredible mentor network with specialists in absolutely everything you can imagine. And, having, those kind of advisors and mentors was really, really helpful as well.
Yeah, as a solopreneur too, you want a sounding board that you could ask questions, get answers, save time really in your journey of trying to get to market and grow a company. Um, like I mentioned earlier, you're not an engineer, but you're obviously a go-getter. You've got ideas and you can execute on those ideas. What was it like to build technology, and how did you go about finding your first engineer and really building an engineering team?
Um, so it's so funny because my at the very very beginning, I tried to find a co-founder and could not find someone that was passionate about, as they said, coding about high heels into late in the night, which is funny because we sell every product imaginable, but that's what I heard a couple times in various formats. But yeah, so I ended up finding our very first engineer on Craigslist,
Nice.
which is, I
Oh,
know,
Craigslist.
everyone's always like, what? Oh my gosh. Yeah, and female entrepreneur or female engineer as well. And we connected, and she was really excited about the idea and helped kind of build the initial proof of concept and the initial versions of the technology. So that was really helpful. Then I would say the other piece was, like, from a product standpoint, um, kind of going back to the first story I shared about building out this fraud system at the other startup. I was really like the internal user of that system at that company, and I worked really really closely with the head of engineering in building out that system, and kind of figuring out what's the best user experience for it, and then improving it during the years that we were there. And that experience helped me really understand product and user experience, and being able to understand engineers and talk to engineers. So that experience essentially helped me be able to plan out what was needed, and then being able to communicate with that first engineer. And I mean, even still today, it really was super, super valuable, and kind of laying that foundation that you need as a non-technical CEO.
That's great to hear. Yeah, I think having a product person in the room and an engineer is great, but you don't always have that when you're starting a company. You start with the idea, and then you find out if there is some demand, and you have to build a prototype, and there's a process to it. So it's not always easy to understand. Going through an accelerator can help that, but there's many that do it without that as well. And just good to kind of hear your story there. Um, so let's talk a little bit about the kind of going about building a startup. Some start with just going out and getting funding, and you want to build and grow, and at some point get to profitability. You did it a little bit differently. You kind of bucked the trend of raising a bunch of money and then growing, and then eventually coming up with an idea of what your burn rate could look like and getting profitable. What Walk us through your process. What led you to buck the trend of doing it that way, which is the typical startup Silicon Valley way, and doing it your way?
Yeah, I mean, there were a few things, and I will say, at first, I had started having early conversation with early conversations with venture capitalists, and it wasn't going very well. So I had some of those early conversations, and it was very, it was very tough. And and then I realized, I'm like, look, I'm pretty good salesperson, and like I could sell better to customers than apparently I could to VCs too. But I, in the early days, there's a lot, especially in Silicon Valley, about, everyone kind of to some extent follows a lot of the same processes, and like, this is how you do it. You find your co-founder, you get venture capital, you go through this process, that to the point where I didn't even in the early days think about, oh, could you launch a company without a co-founder? Could you launch a company without venture capital, and these other alternative routes that are possible? And essentially, I have, had to found my own way along the way. So at the very beginning, I had some of those early conversations, and it wasn't, working out as fast as I wanted and what I was looking for. And I moved to New York, and then I, finally had progress from one VC who said, we'll fund you, but we need you in our backyard because you're early stage. And I'm like, I just got to New York, and I would have had to move back to San Francisco, which some people would say, just move back, take the money, and then you can go back to New York later. But, ethically didn't want to do that. But two, also realized, I'm like, if I moved back to San Francisco, the business would fail, because it needed to be in New York because there's, certain, this type of business, about the connections, about the relationships, it's about business development. So anyway, decided to decline that, stay in New York, and then essentially at the very beginning self-funded it a little bit until I could get the proof of concept together, and then went through AngelList eventually, early with that, and raised through primarily through AngelList and 500 startups, kind of on a rolling basis, until we we raised about 2.5 million or so, and used that alongside with our revenues, but primarily focused on revenue so that we could get to profitability and not be tied to needing that next round of funding along the way.
Yeah, really great. And that seems to be the playbook a lot of companies are doing now. You did this, a few years back prior to the trend of getting the profitability rather than taking the money and trying to build something that may or may not be profitable in the next 5, 10 years. When you look at your company today, let's talk a little bit about some of the lessons that you've learned. You've had to go out and build a team. You've had to hire people. What are some of the things that you can share about your experience there, and maybe some of the lessons around hiring as a solopreneur, as a founder?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, there's a lot of lessons in that space. I would say one around hiring would be, you need to hire an assistant early on. I just recently hired an assistant, and I don't know if there's a little bit of like a mental block around having an assistant or something, and having someone, she's literally not just doing my calendar and things like that. She's reading my every single email. She files it, she coordinates it, she responds, and she reduces the number of emails that actually need myself to look at and answer. But there was a little bit of a mental block that I had around hiring an assistant, and like, do I need one? Does that seem, I don't know, elitist or something? So I kind of avoided it for a while until I was eventually convinced recently. I'm like, that you have to have an assistant, and it's been amazing. So it really finally having an assistant has opened up probably like 3 hours in my schedule every single day. It's a shocking amount of time. So now, so that's one thing that I would say to anyone listening is, would really, really recommend that you do that. If you don't, even if you have a shared assistant, it really helps, but give them access to your email, because it is a game changer. You don't have to sit there all day waiting for feeling like you're in your inbox and you're just like living your life focused on what's the next email that comes in.
Yeah, that's great. I think part of the problem also is delegating what you want them to do. I have an assistant as well, and sometimes you want to sort of control the day, the week, the quarter, the month, whatever it is, and you work much better as a team when you delegate and let others support and help what you're trying to get done. But there's no one there to tell you what you should and shouldn't be doing, what you should let others do for you. What's worked for you?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I mean, there's a couple things. Part of it is, yeah, you have to get used to not having control. I mean, and like my days are so much better scheduled because one person is like fitting them all together. That I'll have, and maybe some people don't want this, but on some days I'll have 10 meetings but I'll be like, oh my gosh, I cannot believe how productive the day was because of the way that she was able to schedule it in. And then as far as like the other part of your question of, what's worked well, also before I hired her, what I did was, essentially I just opened up a Word doc or a notes thing on the side of my computer. And every time I did something for about a week, every time I did something that I felt like, okay, the CEO of the company should not be doing this. Like, this is not a good use of my time. I wrote it in that spreadsheet or in that doc. So over like about a week, and I had so much stuff in there that I couldn't believe. And I'm like, okay, these are the things. So I used that to create a playbook for her for when she started, plus giving her email and calendar responsibilities. But that really helped because it made me, I think, just a lot more aware of what I was spending time on. And time gets away from all of us so quickly. Like, you think, oh, it's just going to take me 1 minute to do this. And even after I hired her, when I had that thought, like, oh, it'll just be easier if I do it, or I can do this in 2 minutes, or it's going to take me 15 to train her. It's like, no, you need to teach the person to fish, right?
Right.
So I'm like, no. I have to stop myself every time, no matter how easy it is. If it's easier for me to do it than her, that's fine, but I'm going to show her how to do it. So that works well. And then using something like Loom so that you can basically record whatever it is you're doing for training, and then they file it in a playbook so they can come back and watch it anytime they need to relearn whatever a certain task was. That has worked really, really well too.
That's great. Yeah, we do the same. And, it's the training the person to teach them what you want them to do and collaborate with you is sometimes, yeah, you think, is the investment worth the time now? I can just get this done really fast. And then those 30 things that only take a minute end up taking half your day. And there you go. There's the value you're not giving the other person. So that
Exactly.
makes a ton of sense. You mentioned Revlon, and look, that's a big company. It's a great company. Getting your foot in the door must have been tough. And getting your foot in the door for many big companies is probably tough. What's a strategy you used to get in the door that helped you maybe with them or other relationships that you can share?
Yeah, one strategy that worked really well for us was creating an advisory board that had key individuals with different specialties. So at Shoppable, we need to have a lot of large retail partners. We needed to have publishers. We need the advertisers. There's a lot of kind of moving pieces. So as I mentioned, one of the reasons of moving to New York was we had to get all these partnerships in place. So I essentially established Shoppable's advisory board and reached out to key individuals that were influential, had great networks within the different spaces that I needed to get into. And was able to get in touch with them, pitch them on the idea, get them excited about it, and then obviously get them involved. And that has worked so well to set up meetings with, all the major publishers. I mean, we ended up launching the technology with the Wall Street Journal. So most people,
Oh,
would not launch for the first time with a company of the caliber of the Wall Street Journal. But we were super lucky, and part of that was cool technology, but a lot of it is being able to have those relationships with the right people that can make that introduction, and that warm introduction say, like, look, this is the technology that you need, this is worth your time, and then come and sit in those meetings and help. So that's a strategy that worked really, really well for us in getting these super important relationships.
that's great. How big did you build the advisory board to? And then what's in it for the advisor?
Yeah, I think we had. maybe up to 8 people or so. Kind of changed a little bit over time here and there, but usually structured around equity. In some cases, there are also investors or other things too, but yeah, typically equity based.
And what was the experience for Wall Street Journal? What did you do specifically for them with your technology out of the gate?
We launched a holiday gift guide. So they wanted to create a luxury gift guide with a variety of products coming from various retailers. I think we had Neiman Marcus and Saks Fifth Avenue and some cool tech from Best Buy. But they curated this kind of luxury gift guide within WSJ.com based around who their readers were, and you could shop all those products and from a single checkout directly on WSJ.com.
Really cool. What's the business model? You have multiple different parts to the business. You got companies that are selling products, retailers, publishers. How does it work for Shoppable?
Yeah, so on the retailer side, for retailers integrating into Shoppable and integrating their product catalog, we don't charge them anything. So completely free for them to integrate. Our model is SaaS with companies that want to license the technology. So software as a service for whether it's a consumer packaged good company or it's an ad tech platform or a publisher wanting to license the technology to make their site or app or platform shoppable, they tend to pay an annual SaaS license fee to us. That's the typical structure.
So let's take my company, for example, Match Relevant. We're a services company, but say I wanted to sell this shirt and we don't have a Shopify account. We're not an e-commerce company, but you know what, look, we got listeners. We want to give stuff away. We want them to be able to buy stuff too. Could I take a buy button, a shoppable buy button, put it on our website and have someone click that? I don't have any inventory. I got to actually make the shirts when people want to buy them. And once that happens, would I get an alert or something that would say, look, this person is interested in that shirt in this size? And then from there, I would go make the shirt, send it to them. I'd pay you a fee for the SaaS platform, but ultimately provide a solution for e-commerce for a brand.
Yeah, we would. So we would be Shoppable would be able to be the buy button and the checkout that you could embed directly on your current site, and then we'd work with one of our partners that would handle. We don't actually do the fulfillment ourselves, but we'd work with one of our partners that would handle that production or fulfillment.
Oh, that's great. I love the business model. How big is the market?
The overall market. I mean, we essentially kind of consider the affiliate marketing space the market, because in a lot of cases that's where the starting point. But we're kind of in an interesting place because we have kind of started within that affiliate marketing space, replacing a lot of kind of old affiliate type of technologies. And then now it's so funny because I mean, the market is kind of coming together from a lot of different places, because you also have you also have retail media and you have commerce media and you have CTV. So we're really kind of in the middle of a lot of different pieces. So it's kind of hard for us to have, like, we don't really have one specific one. And again, that's our vision, is to be the shoppable layer across any of these forms of digital content. So it's a pretty big market.
Yeah, that's great. So I want to just go back to, you talked about Revlon. When you got your foot in the door with Revlon, who were you selling to? Who's the buyer on the side when you're trying to get into a CPG company?
Yeah, well, I couldn't remember specifically with Revlon who, with that particular example, but yeah, we usually sell to. It can be like an innovation team. It can be usually the marketing team. Sometimes it's a brand manager. It kind of depends on the company, but we tend to send it directly to to the brand versus through other agencies and things.
Got it. For the listeners, give us some big logos of companies you've worked with, so they might not even know they're using your technology, but you're embedded in these companies.
Yeah, I mean, we've done experiences with, we mentioned the Wall Street Journal, with Walmart, with Martha Stewart, with Best Buy, a lot of really big companies.
Big brand, big box companies. Wow. I'm sure I'm somewhere in your database of purchasing something from Best Buy. Great. So, um, okay, this has been really informative to kind of learn. We hear all the time that, it's not always the founder that makes the company, but it's the people around them that do. How do you filter for talent to ensure you get it right when you're hiring people, not just locally, but also remotely?
How do we get it right? I mean, I think it's so important to get it right. I think you have to spend enough time with the individuals, and I think it's important to, like, in that time. I think especially at the the higher end kind of executive levels, of having um, multiple meetings, even with the executive team, with that person that you're hiring, because you can different. What am I trying to say? We ask this again?
Yeah. No problems. Um, Go ahead here. We hear all the time, it's not just the founders that make a company great, but the people they decide to hire. How do you filter for talent to ensure you get it right?
Yeah, I think the filtering process is really important, and part of it is really involving in your team and creating the space for your team to give honest feedback on the candidates. And I'll give you a quick story if I can. There's one individual. I'm going to go back to the last company, the startup I was at, and the founder there had told us that. The founder there had told us that we should provide feedback on any of the candidates that they were interviewing. And at the time, I was the most junior person at the company, so take that with with what you want for this story. And they hired someone who was going to be my boss, and I interviewed with him, and I think I was one of the last people to interview him. And I asked him I think I asked him how he planned, how he planned to start the first week, and what he was most excited about, or something along those lines. And he, you know, looked at me and was like, I don't know yet. I haven't really thought about it. And he was so, and I think he just was so casual with me, because I was going to be his direct report, and and I was super junior, so he didn't really think about it. So I shared that back with the executive team at the time, and said, I just don't think he's the right person. Like, this is a big role, and if he hasn't really thought about it. And they, took what I said, and they considered, and they said, oh, well, we appreciate that, but we disagree. They hired him, and then I think about 30 days later, they let him go.
Oh,
And
wow.
it was not a fit. And they said that was their lesson learned, that they really needed to listen to everybody on the team and really consider that. And they said he didn't have a plan. So it was exactly what I told them. So I took that as another lesson learned with me for hiring, and making sure that I asked the whole team, including, a lot of people will say this, but including asking your assistant or someone that maybe might not officially be part of the interview process, but you want to know what kind of person you're working with, and how they're treating everybody, and are they taking their direct report seriously, those types of things. So that was very valuable.
Yeah, that's great. I think it's always important to get different opinions. Uh, in the interview process, you're going to get different answers, and you'll find out something that maybe one person won't know until you get together and huddle and kind of do a debrief. But I think that's great advice. Being an entrepreneur is not always shared with many people around you. It can be a lonely journey. How do you continue to invest in your personal and professional development as you continue to build your company?
Ooh, I love this question. So for me, I have found I found a business coach that has really, really helped. And I think that, as entrepreneurs, depending upon where you are in your career, but all entrepreneurs, you're growing with your company, and as you are going from one stage to the next, you have new things that you need to learn. So I think it's really important that you invest in your skills. So I've hired a business coach that specifically works with other entrepreneurs that are at our stage and have, similar challenges, similar goals. And that really helps me be a better leader. It helps me understand how to invest in my team and in our leaders and helping them coach their team. And that's just really been super, super valuable.
Yeah, I'm a huge believer in coaching too. And I have a coach, and we just had a coaching session this morning for our whole team, about little things that make a big difference. And you don't always think about the tactical stuff when you're talking strategy, or if you're, looking at tactical things, you have to think of, working on the business, not in the business, and some of the things that we don't always know. So I think that's great. You know, Personally, are there any books, podcasts, or resources that have had a significant impact on you as an entrepreneur and in your journey?
Yeah, I would say early, there's so many, but if I just pull out two off the top of my head, I would say Never Eat Alone by Keith Ferrazzi was one I read many years ago. And, just some really good kind of ways to think about building relationships with people and helping other people, and how to create deeper connections with people. And that really has helped a lot in the business. And then more recently, Buy Back Your Time by Dan Martell. One of the best business books I've read in a long time, and really, really tactical advice, including, on the importance of getting an assistant. So part of the contributor to me finally deciding that I need to hire that position and move with that. But there's a lot of really, really great tactical advice in that book too.
Really cool. Yeah. And I think also just learning in general. When you stop learning, you stop leading, and,
Yes.
having ideas that aren't always coming from yourself, but others, can be really beneficial, not just for you, but for your team. So I think that's great. I'm going to switch gears here now. We're going to ask 3 questions. It's just simply that, 3 questions with 3 simple answers. Where do you go to think big or to brainstorm?
Mm. In the summer, I go up to our rooftop because it's like I'm in New York, so one place you can kind of see further away, so it helps you to visually adjust your eyes and your mind. So that's kind of my favorite place, I would say.
I love that. I used to do the same. I lived in New York, and there's nothing better than rooftops. When you're there, you see so many things that you typically don't see walking on the streets there. What?
It's a different perspective for
No
sure.
doubt, no doubt. What activity helps you come up with ideas that make you maybe think differently or better when you're sitting in the office and kind of stuck on a topic?
Yeah, I would say there's two that come to mind for that. One, I would say going to whether it's going to like a founder's lunch or a mastermind or something like that, where you're surrounded by other executives or entrepreneurs, and especially if they have different businesses. Sometimes I find that's where I get a lot of great ideas, is by hearing how other businesses operate completely different from yours and how they solve different problems. And I can think about how, okay, that starts kind of creating this like creative spiral about like, okay, that's interesting. Maybe wonder if we could do it this way. So that's really one thing that helps. And then reading. I mean, we talked a little bit about a couple different books, but it just really changes your mindset and opens up your vision, and creates space for obviously new information, new skills. But that always just that's really helpful for me as well.
It's great. Last one. What works for you in staying positive when the business is going through its ups and downs?
Hmm. I think staying focused on the vision, and staying focused on the larger goals. And that especially when you have, been an entrepreneur for a long time, you realize that a bad day or a bump is just that. It's a bad day. It's a bump. Some of them are really, really bad. Some of them are, bad, but not quite as bad. Some of them are really high, right? You're going to have those levels. But I think having, the ability to know that you can always get over it, and that it is like when you zoom out, it's just like a speck on the timeline of everything else that you're putting together. So try not to let anything get you down.
I love that. Well, as we wrap up here, we look into 2024. We're not too far away. What's on the roadmap for Shoppable? What are you excited about?
Yeah, we're really excited about a couple different things right now. First, I would say our new API suite. So earlier this year, we launched into beta Checkout API, and this is really cool because it is first and foremost, it finally allows the ability for various ad tech companies and commerce media to enable in-ad shopping. So where you can actually complete a purchase directly within an ad, directly within content, and it can be done so in a truly white label experience for that advertiser. So this checkout API is really cool, but what we've launched that's kind of an extra special piece of it is the ability for Shoppable to retain PCI compliance for our customers. So for anyone who's listening that isn't familiar with PCI, it's essentially the security board and regulations, and sets the regulations from the credit card industry. So anyway, big companies that anyone that touches credit cards has to be PCI compliant, and a lot of big companies want to avoid that. So Shoppable's PCI compliant. We have been for many, many years, but it allows this new API that we have allows us to keep that PCI compliant so that our customers don't have to, but they can still utilize the checkout API. So that's really cool. And then the second thing I'll just mention really quickly is that we have started expanding globally. So now, we can make anything shoppable anywhere in the world. And
Wow.
in 2024, we'll be doing a lot more international. So you'll be seeing that come.
Wow, that is exciting. You can travel and use your platform and enjoy wherever you're at, Riviera, Mexico, wherever. I love it.
Sounds fantastic.
Great. Well, if anybody wanted to find you or find Shoppable to learn more about it, where would they go?
Yeah, Instagram's probably best. I'm at Heather Marie Udo, and Shoppable is at Shoppable.
Great. Well, there you have it. Heather, thanks so much for coming on and joining us. Appreciate your time. And to all of our listeners for listening, it means the world to us that you've chosen to be with us today. My name is Jake Aaron Villarreal, and signing off for now, but can't wait to catch up with you all in the next episode. Until then, take care. Before we wrap up, I want to give a big shout out to all the entrepreneurs that have joined to make this podcast possible, and for all the listeners for listening. It means the world to me that you chose to spend your time with us today. I'm your host, Jake Aaron Villarreal, signing off for now, but can't wait to connect with you all soon on the next episode. Take care. This show is sponsored by Match Relevant, a company that helps venture-backed startups find the best people in the market, and they do it in 3 simple steps. First, they sit down with founders to understand their story. Second, they tell their story into multiple candidate channels. And third, they schedule interviews within 48 hours. Find us at matchrelevant.com to learn more about how we do it.